Test 1, 2. Cool.
Check 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Check, check. And to mute it because last time that I went to the bathroom, it was kind of.
And then just over here on the left.
Okay, we're good. All right, good morning. Now that's way too loud. Good morning. I hope everyone had a wonderful night last night, and I hope everyone had a great day yesterday in the first day of the conference. I know that I did, and I know all the staff here that worked on the conference was excited to see everyone participating, and we hope that we have another great day today. But at the end of yesterday, I felt kind of bad that I could only say good morning in my Alabama English, so I started looking up other ways to say good morning. So maybe if you recognize it, you can give me some tips, because I'm sure I'm going to get this wrong. Let's see. The first one, I can do this one. I took 5 years of Spanish, and this is the only word I remember, buenos dias. Is that good? Okay, I'm worried about the next one. God morgen. Swedish. Was that even close? Does anybody speak Swedish? Was that close? Very good. Italian. Buongiorno. Yes. Welsh. And I am part Welsh, so I should get this one, right? Borada. Nobody speaks Welsh, do they? So we're just going to say that's a win. We're going to go with the win for that one. Portuguese. Bom dia. Bom dia. Okay, and I'm not doing so well all of a sudden. Is good Morgan, Dutch. Good. And another way that we say it in Alabama is we say, how's your mama name, right? That's how we say it. So good morning in all those languages, and I did that as a way to show how important all of you are. We have access to courts and due process, because if you leave it up to me, we're in a lot of trouble. So I want to thank all of you for the job and the services that you provide, everyone. So thank you very much. I would like to make a reminder that I think everyone noticed at the end of the day yesterday, it starts to get a little bit warmer in the afternoons. So if we could do our best to keep the door closed as much as possible, and events to go through the back to keep a little bit of the coolness in the room. We do have devices. I don't know why my mic is cutting in and out. I apologize. We do have hearing assist devices, so if you need those, talk to either the IT guys here or in the other room. They'll be happy to get you set up with those. And just like yesterday, Todd is to present another award. So Todd, to you.
Good morning, everyone. I just wanted to also recognize the staff that made this conference happen: Stephanie Lorick, Molly Hay, Jeff Four, Terry Rogers, and Cody. Also, I would like to thank the special support that I received from John Lynn, our trial court administrator, and he's here today. I hope everyone learned and were able to experience and think about different topics yesterday. I am so proud of having this conference and to recognize the court interpreting profession. You are professionals, just like certified court mediators, expert witnesses, and also court reporters by having a code of conduct. And I also want to thank and give a special reference to the Office of the State Court Administrator with Rose Patterson, Lisa Bell, Debbie Howes, and Lindsay. They were instrumental in helping, so thank you. Also, I would like to take this opportunity to recognize a special court interpreter that we have in the 5th, who has helped us with ADA processes, who has helped us with a welcome video, who has helped us with different things when it comes to the court interpreting profession. And I would like to recognize Julie Balassa as the Court Interpreter of the Year.
Todd, before you walk off, I know you didn't think we were going to finish this without recognizing you. My name's Courtney Hodgen. I'm the Senior Court Analyst for the Court Program with the OSCA. And I just want to take a moment to express our great appreciation to you, Todd. This event has been phenomenal. A couple of years ago, Justice Labarga, who at the time was Chief Justice of the Supreme Court, he said in passing that it would be great for Florida's interpreters to have their own conference where the interpreters and other language access professionals could come and mingle, network, and build camaraderie around. And you went with it. This whole thing with no money and no direct orders from the court. So to present you with this 2019 Visionary Award for Mr. Todd Tuzolino for your vision and implementation of the first statewide Florida Court Interpreter Conference. Oh, you're welcome.
Thank you so much. You're welcome.
Okay, and without further ado, I'd like to introduce our keynote speaker today, Mr. Augustine de la Mora, and I'm sure to the spoken language interpreters here, really needs no introduction, so I'll be happy to hand it over to Mr. de la Mora.
Thank you. Good morning. Can everybody hear me? Good. Well, thanks. This is such an honor and really a pleasure to be here today. Thank you for inviting me, dear colleagues. I started about Thank you. I started about 30 years ago in the Florida courts. I was 9 years old at the time, I remember well. And at that time, I started my career because I was very well prepared and qualified. I was a Berlitz teacher, and I taught languages. And one of my students wanted to use an interpreter for a deposition, and asked my director if I could do the interpretation for him. And I said, and my director said yes before asking me. And then she talked to me and she said, hey, listen, you know, one of your students wants you to do a deposition for him, for you to be his interpreter. Would you like to do that? And of course, I asked her a very important question. Any idea what the question was? How much? No, that was the second question. My first question was, what's a deposition? I had been in the States for about 3 months. And I spoke English, I taught languages, but I had never been in a court of law other than watching TV. And I said, well, I'm not sure, what's a deposition? She said, oh, well, it's very easy. The attorney asks questions in English, you interpret for their client, and then they answer and you interpret. That's it, it's that easy. I go, I'm not sure. And she goes, and it pays twice as much per hour than teaching. And I said, I'll take it. And that was it. Off I went to do a deposition the next day. And I got my first lesson in interpretation because I remember distinctly that the attorney asked the lady something, and she answered in Spanish, of course. And this was my interpretation, I'll never forget. I said, she says that she went to the mall with her sister and her daughter. Whose daughter? I ask you, whose daughter was it? Whose daughter? Hers who? That's the problem. She says she went to the mall with her sister and her daughter. So the attorney goes, you know what? Can you speak in the first person? Because when you say her and her, I don't know who her is. And when I interpreted in the first person, I said, I went to the mall with my sister and her daughter. Whose daughter was it? This is very simple. That was like, light bulb went up. And the great thing about it is when I finished, the guy told me, "You did a great job," which is always surprising to me because how does he know? Right? I mean, I think that how many of you have been told you did a great job? How many of those people spoke the language that you're interpreting for? 0, right? So what they're saying is, what you told me in English, I understood and it made sense to me. That's what it really means when you do a good job. But he said, "You did a good job. You should go to the courts because they need interpreters." And I went to the courts and I talked to a guy there, and his name was Gonzalo, and he said, "You looking for a job as an interpreter?" I said, "Yeah." He goes, "Do you have any experience?" I said, "Well, I did a deposition yesterday." He goes, "Okay." And I said, "But I'm a Berlitz teacher." "Oh, those are very good," he said. "So can you come tomorrow?" I said, "Sure." I figured it was an interview. I went the next day. Actually, I wore a suit because I figured it was an interview. So the guy walked me and asked me a couple of questions. "Hey, you know, are you legally in the country?" I remember distinctly one of them. And he opened a door and it was a courtroom. And he said, "Okay, so that's Mr. De La Grana. That's his client. The judge will come out in a moment. When you're done, come see me. Good luck." And he left. And that was my training in the 13th Judicial Circuit Court about 32 years ago. So what a difference only 32 years make. Because here we are, over 100 of us here today in a conference. Because I remember I felt lost. As a matter of fact, I was told by the attorney, Mr. De La Grana, "Hey, I need you to do a side translation for my client." And of course, very well informed I was. I said, "What's a side translation?" He said, "I have this document in English. You have to read it in Spanish for the guy." I said, "Okay." So I did. To the best of my ability. I'm sure it wasn't that good. And he said, "When you finish, you have to sign it because the judge wants to make sure that the guy had an interpreter so they didn't come back later and say, oh, I didn't know. So you have to sign it with your name and you put side translated by blah, 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 and the date." And I said, "Okay," and I did. And I remember very well because I wrote this. Side translated by Agustin de la Mora. And, well, did I not do it on site? I truly thought, I was not kidding, I thought that's what it meant, side translation. I did it on site. That's how well informed that I was. So that's how I started my career, and I remember very quickly realizing I was not prepared, but I was lucky to have a lot of colleagues that helped me out along the way. So this is quite an improvement, and again, an honor for me to be here. So let me ask you the first question. How many of you, raise your hand if you are professional interpreters? Wow, great. You sure? Okay. All right. So everybody's a let me ask anybody, what makes you a professional interpreter? Anybody wants to answer? Yeah, back there. Yes? You get paid to do it. Do we agree? So I became a professional interpreter that day of that depot, did I not? 32 years ago, I was already a professional court interpreter. About 2005, I think it was, there was a National Association of Judicial Interpreters and Translators conference in Phoenix, Arizona. And one of the candidates for PhD ran passed a survey around because he was doing his dissertation on court interpretation and asked a bunch of questions. But one of the questions was, before you got paid for the first time as an interpreter, in other words, before you became a professional interpreter, of any kind, legal, medical. As a matter of fact, at that time, I don't think medical interpretation was even mentioned, but community interpreting maybe. Did you study or did you have any formal training or studies in interpretation or translation? What do you think was the percentage of people who said no training before the first time they became professionals, just like I did?
90%.
90%? You're low. It was 93.5%. And I have the feeling about 6% of them were lying. Or fibbing or kind of twisting the truth, right? So, does it surprise you? It didn't surprise me at all, because in this country I realized most of us started just like I did. The test was, do you speak Spanish? Can you be here tomorrow? You're in. That was it. So we're professional interpreters because we get paid. But I suspect now that when we're here now, we have a different idea of what being a professional interpreter is. And I'm here to talk to you for a few minutes about what being a professional interpreter is, and about a couple of things that I want to share real quick, because obviously we don't have a lot of time. So by a show of hands, how many of you are, we already said all of you, or most of you are professional interpreters. How about court interpreters? How about certified court interpreters? Wow, the majority, right? How about medical interpreters? How about certified medical interpreters? We have a few of those too. Congratulations. So we have a lot of us that have decided being bilingual is not enough. We should study. We should get certified. Can we switch to the slides instead of my ugly face? All right, thank you. So let me ask you a question for the whole group. Since you're professional interpreters, can you read this for a second and answer it in your head first? You're hired to work in a court. When you get there, the attorney asks you to explain to her clients what's an arraignment. Well, she interviews a new client. You do what? Think about it for a second. I know it's a difficult question, and you were not prepared for quizzes this morning, so there it is. You're an interpreter. You're nothing if not very flexible, right? All right. So answers, raise your hand. Yes, ma'am. No explaining. Yes?
So the attorney, you'd be happy to explain it to him as an interpreter. When he explains it to them, you interpret what he says.
That's right. So you don't explain as an interpreter. You would interpret the explanation from the attorney to the person, right? Does anybody disagree? Wow. Maybe I should leave now. Class dismissed. All right. Now, all of you agree on this. How did you get that decision? Why did you make that decision? What helped you guide your decision? What? We're an attorney, but somebody mentioned something interesting. The code of ethics, that famous code of ethics, which, by the way, I don't know if you know this, but in most states, it is no longer called the code of ethics. Did you know that? Including Florida. Surprised? It is not called the code of ethics. It's called the code of professional conduct. And the reason we changed it from the code of ethics, not we, people changed it from the code of ethics to the code of profession, is because of the word ethics. Because I want you to think for a second, ethics, when I say the word ethics, what does that bring to mind? Morals. What else? Not everybody at the same time. I get confused. Please, go ahead. Behavior. Just any behavior? Good behavior? Ambiguity. Thank you. That's what it really brings to mind. Ambiguity. Because what is moral? Right? What something that could be very moral for me could be very immoral for somebody else. Do we agree? What is good or right or appropriate for me is not necessarily a good, moral, right thing to do for somebody else. And because of that difficulty, ethics was kind of shoved out of the name and could put professional conduct. Now, of course, we have a code of ethics, and codifying was what gave it some strength, right? We follow the code of ethics. So all of us here are professional interpreters who follow the code of ethics. Well, now we know it's really, you decided based on the fact that there is a code of ethics. Now we know it's actually called Code of Professional Conduct, right? And why do they exist? Why do we have codes of conduct? So they tell us what to do in situations, right? It's awesome. Codes of ethics tell us what to do. When in doubt, go to the code of ethics. Do we agree? Yes. And it's really black and white, isn't it? It's very easy. Look at the code, that's it. Yes? Well, let's look at the code. Before I go to the code, this is a Florida Court Interpreter's Code, right? Before I go to it, let me challenge you to do something. Take a piece of paper out and a pen and write down, first of all, how many canons are there on the Florida Court Interpreter's Code of Conduct? It's not a trick question, people. It's a finite number, I promise. Isn't that interesting? I have a room full of professional court interpreters certified by the state of Florida, and they're not sure about how many canons. So don't worry about it, the number. Write down what you remember are the canons of the Code of Professional Conduct or Ethics. Whatever you remember. Go. What? Why didn't you say it, Mary?
Held it up.
Oh, sign language over there, spoken language over here, right? Did you see it? Did you see it? Yeah, all right, okay, but he said nothing, you see? All right, so there are 9. Can you write them down? Can you come up with 9? I see some of you have 0 on your paper. Come on, don't be lazy. There has to be at least 1 or 2 that you remember, right? All right, contributions. What do you guys remember? Yes?
Conflict of interest.
Conflict of interest, that's one of them. Yes, very good. Any others? Come on, Marta, you wrote it down. You're shy, well, okay. You write it down and pass me the paper. That'll work too. All right. Representation of qualifications. All right. Any others? Accuracy and completeness. This is like pulling teeth, people. You're interpreters. You're supposed to love to talk or sign or both, right? Anything else? Yes? Duty to report impediments to your performance. Yes. Any others? Impartiality. Yes. Wow, finally. Well, let's see. Let's go. Since nobody's completely sure, or you're all as shy as Martha is, let's just go through all 9 real quick, right? First of all, we have a code of professional conduct. That's why it's called what it's called in Florida. And it says, in case you didn't know, it's Rule 14.300, right? And it says professional conduct. All court interpreters shall act in a professional manner, whatever that means, because I thought we meant if we get paid, that's professional, right? In keeping with the Code of Professional Conduct as set forth herein. Interpret that to any language, people. Failure to adhere to the code may lead to disciplinary action, and disciplinary action is at the discretion of the board. For those of you who didn't know, we have a board, and you can be disciplined if you are a certified court interpreter. So, quickly, Rule 14.3.1, one of the ones that was mentioned, accuracy and completeness. Interpreters have a professional obligation to interpret accurately and completely. Number 2, representation of qualifications. Interpreters are not to misrepresent their qualifications. If they're certified, they should say so. If they're not certified, they shouldn't. And in the state of Florida, we have different designations. You should know what yours is. And kind of sort of know what I'm doing is not a part of the certification program, right? You should know exactly what you hold. And in the state of Nevada, in 2014, they actually made it illegal for an interpreter to say they were certified court interpreters if they're not. And in 2015, for the first time, a person got prosecuted in the state of Nevada for representing that he was a certified court interpreter working a trial, being found out, got arrested, spent the night in jail, and part of his punishment is that he can never get certified in the state of Nevada, period. So I expect more and more states to start upping the ante and putting some teeth on this certification process. Number 3, impartiality and avoidance of conflict of interest. As interpreters, we should be impartial and we should avoid conflicts of interest. Confidentiality, those two were mentioned before. One of the ones I want to talk about real quick is confidentiality, restriction of public comment. This one we'll leave for another time, but confidentiality. When is an interpreter part of a confidential exchange? Is everything that we do confidential? Yes? Really? No? Really? Who said yes? You said yes? Why? Everything we do is confidential? No. You said that it is? Can you speak? Sign language interpreters. Everything you do is confidential. So if you're interpreting a trial on the witness stand, is that confidential? No, but what you do is not really confidential, right? It's a matter of public record. Do we agree? If you're interpreting at the witness stand, unless it's a secret trial, it's a matter of public record. So that per se is not secret or confidential. Do we agree? Yes, sir. Right. So when you are interpreting between a client and his or her attorney, that conversation is confidential, right? If
there's an expectation of privacy and then confidentiality, if privilege hasn't been waived.
That's right. And we have an attorney here who's telling the, oh, I'm sorry, I thought you were an attorney. Well, if, right, because apparently there's a big if. If there is an expectation of confidentiality, apparently there's places where there's no expectation of confidentiality. Yes?
Grand juries.
Grand juries, right? If you're interpreting there, that's confidential information. So there's certain information that is confidential. All right. Remember that when we're talking professional demeanor. Nobody mentioned that. I don't know why, but it means basically that as an interpreter you have to adhere to the code, you have to dress professionally, act professionally, etc. Scope of practice, for me, that should be the easiest one to understand. What's the scope of your practice? Interpreting. What else?
Your language, not another language.
All right. Okay. That's it. So the scope of your practice is interpreting. I have a friend of mine, Patricia Mikkelsen King, who says you need 2 to tango, but you need 3 to interpret. If there are less than 3 people involved, that's called a conversation. So the scope of your practice should be easy to understand. Assessing and reporting impediments to your performance. Yes. Examples? Examples of impediments to your performance?
Can't hear.
What? You can't hear. Yes. What else? What? You don't understand the message. Yes, although we interpreters, we understand everything. Hey, listen, on the same poll, do you remember that survey that I told you? One of the questions was, what is your area of specialization? And it said, you know, legal, medical, blah, blah, conference. We had about 6 categories, and one of them was all of the above. Guess which one was picked the most? Absolutely. So I don't know what you're talking about. We know everything. All right. What else? Yes?
As a sign language interpreter, line of sight.
Line of sight. Yeah, as you can see, I'm very careful with that. Right? Anything else? Yes? What? Knowledge of the subject matter. Yes? If the speaker has an accent, then I'm out. Yes. Speed. So everybody is coming up with a lot of impediments to performance, right? Nobody has mentioned something that I want you to think about. Is an ethical dilemma an impediment to your performance? But almost never do I hear it coming out of the interpreter's mouths. But if you think about it, an ethical dilemma, an ethical conundrum could be an impediment to your performance. And according to the code, you're supposed to communicate with the court if there's an impediment to your performance. Yes, sir? Say it louder.
I said when I went to the orientation, somebody had mentioned having a problem with certain situations that when the person conducting the orientation said maybe they shouldn't work in that field now.
Okay, well, I respectfully disagree. As a matter of fact, in the code we saw another part that says conflict of interest. We know that as an interpreter, you could have a conflict of interest, and according to the code, you're not supposed to work that case. It doesn't say get the hell out of the profession, but I don't know exactly what that meant. All right, duty to report ethical violations. That doesn't make you the ethical police. You don't go around and say, I'm giving you a ticket for an ethical violation. That's not what it means at all. It basically means if you are asked or forced or try to be forced to commit an ethical violation, you should report that. And, of course, you have a commitment to professional development, which makes perfect sense, right? Because I always use this with my colleagues. I go, if you went to a doctor for the first time and the doctor has a diploma that says Harvard Medical School 2000, wouldn't you be happy that now you have a Harvard-educated doctor? And then it says summa cum laude. Hey, top of the class, 19 years experience, Harvard-educated, awesome. And then he says, and to keep costs down, because I love my patients, you go, oh my God, did I win the lotto? Is this a like candid camera? And he goes, to keep that down, I don't go to any medical conventions. I don't read any medical books. I keep the price down by even using the same stethoscope I had for 20 years. My daddy gave it to me. And as far as I know, they haven't moved the organs from where they were before, so I'm fine. What would you do? And most people say, I would get dressed and run, right? And shouldn't that be the case for interpreters too then? So a lot of people say, I'm certified and that's it, right? It reminds me of Pancho Villa's soldiers. Pancho Villa, does everybody know who Pancho Villa was? Well, Pancho Villa was a hero or a thief, depending on who you talk to, or a bandido, depending on who you talk to, of the Mexican Revolution. But he was a famous general, and he was a very successful general in his own right. And his warriors, his soldiers, were very brave and very appreciated. Los Dorados de Villa, they used to be called, and they were really good fighters. And when they were going to take Durango, he gave them like a big speech before attacking the fort, and he said, hey, listen, people, we have to take this fort. It's crucial for the Mexican Revolution. This could make or break the revolution, so we have the responsibility. We have to do it. But I have to tell you, we're outnumbered 3-1. So we really, really have to fight hard to make this happen. So is everybody with me? And you know how they go with those talks, just like they do in the NFL, then they go, hey, and the Dorados, and that's it. And the next day, they attack the fort. And in the middle of the battle, when everything is like explosions, and it's really the very middle of the battle, there's a guy, one of the Pancho Villa soldiers, sitting under a tree going like this. So Pancho Villa goes to him and says, hey man, what, are you crazy? We're in the middle of the battle. And he goes, hey, I killed my 3. So that's what some of us have the attitude, right? Hey, I got certified. That's it. No, it ain't, right? We should continue our education. That's part of the code. So based on this code, let me ask you to get together. I would like you to, turn around and find a few friends. I'm not going to say how many in the group, but some good friends around you, and answer, what would you do in this following scenario? You're hired to work during an attorney-client interview at the attorney's office. The lawyer steps out of the room and the NES tells you something about the case. Is that confidential information? Go ahead and discuss it amongst yourselves. I'm going to give you a couple minutes. Go. And I need somebody from each group to give me an answer, okay? Go. What? Non-English speaker. LEP, that's limited English proficiency. Same thing. LEP or NES, people, all right? We can add, to make it fair, we can add a person who can't hear too and needs a sign language interpreter. Sign language, you're included, of course. I know, honey, but this is what they gave me.
I know, it's all good, it's all good. I'm going to jump on top of it.
Yeah, exactly. Piggyback. You decided already? Oh, wow. Oh, you're just listeners. Silent partners, okay. All right, time's up. Time is up. Attention shoppers. All right. Listen, I knew that this was when they told me 50 minutes, I laughed out loud because it takes me 50 minutes to warm up, but I mean, we have to stay with the program, right? So, raise your hand, give me some answers here. Yes, sir. Can you speak up? Maybe what we can do is borrow this. Or not, since we don't have another one. Second one. So speak up, you're an interpreter. Go.
Usually when the NES starts saying something about the case, we would stop and say, hold it, just an interpreter, and if they call me as a witness, I don't want to say anything that you said to me that would hurt your case, so wait for your attorney to get back, and then I'll interpret whatever you want to ask.
Thank you very much. So one of our colleagues say, as soon as they start talking, we stop them. Now, I love the idea. One thing that I would love you to stop saying, I'm just the interpreter. From now on, you say, I am the interpreter. Without me, there ain't no communication, period. And you notice my perfect grammar, right? All right. So, without me, there is no communication going on. There's no access to justice. I'm not just the interpreter. I am the interpreter. All right? So, but thank you very much. So you would stop them. That's one thing. But of course, what if they already spilled the beans? Let's say they say, I have to tell you, man, I did kill him. Is that confidential? What else? Other colleagues that discuss the case? Yes?
Well, that information belongs to the attorney, because if you are speaking as an interpreter for the client and for the attorney, you are covered by the privilege of the client-attorney privilege. So that is confidential, that aspect. Now, what was interesting we discussed is, what if the client says, I think that attorney is hitting on me?
All right. You say, oh, I know him. He's a dog. He hits on me too. Now, here's a problem. That sounds logical, but the attorney is not present. So that cone of silence, does it still count? What do you say?
Not there.
No, it doesn't.
Yeah, some people here go, no, and when it's time to talk, all right, so.
When the attorney is not there, there's no expectation of confidentiality.
So we heard that before, right? Expectation of confidentiality. If the attorney is not there, is there an expectation of confidentiality? Our colleagues say no. How many people, by a show of hands, says confidentiality is not expected if the attorney is not present? Very few. I thought you thought that, so did you change your mind? Okay, the question was, how many of you think that because the attorney is gone, there's no confidentiality because there's no attorney present? How many of you think that? Not very many. Okay, so the rest of you that didn't raise your hand, I guess you believe that confidentiality remains without the presence of the attorney.
Yes. You're in the attorney's office.
You're in the attorney's office. Are you an agent of the attorney? Because if you are, confidentiality remains. But are you an agent of the attorney? What happened to impartiality? I guess that let's go to the code thing is not as easy as it sounds. You know why? Because we're not attorneys. How many of you are actually attorneys here? Okay, Madam Attorney, what's the answer?
I have no idea.
Exactly. So I bring this to your attention because apparently this confidentiality is not as easy as it sounds. Now, I have to tell you, I didn't come here to tell you the solution. I came here because I wanted to share with you some important things that I have been thinking about and I'm hoping to have enough time to cover, because I think we need to either revamp the Code of Ethics, Code of Professional Conduct, or we need better explanation, or we need better guidelines, or we need to start applying what actually happens in the field, because codes of conduct are not necessarily planned that way. Let's go to the next question. You interpret for a lawyer and his client in jail. You're called to trial. Turns out it's the same defendant. What do? Discuss it amongst yourselves real quick.
Participate with Josh's Friday.
I'm sorry?
Do you participate in Josh's, the federal court supervising interpreters, Friday afternoon conference, phone conferences? Oh, okay, well, he talks about this all the time.
Yeah. You talk to me after the break. All right, I'm running out of time. So, answers. Yes. You divulge it to the court. Okay. All right, so one of the proposals is you tell the court and let them handle it, which is, I think, is the strategy called pass the buck strategy. Very good strategy. Anything else? Yes?
Just recuse yourself.
Automatically recuse yourself, some people say. Any others? But I'm a freelancer, people. If I recuse myself every time I already interpret for somebody somewhere else, I won't have a job after a while, right? Yes?
The correct procedure for sign language interpreters anyway is you have an interpreter for the court, which you cannot do because it's a procedure interpreter, but you can be the table interpreter and interpret for the defendant and his lawyer.
Right. So sign language interpreters, which are eons ahead of us, spoken language interpreters, especially in that field, have it right in my estimation because they have more people employed. It's a good idea, right? So they have the proceedings interpreters and then the table interpreters. and they don't mix. So that would be a solution, obviously, but as we know, spoken language interpreters, it's not that easy to convince the courts to have 2 proceedings interpreters plus a table interpreter, right? It should be. Okay, got it. I think ASL interpreters have an easier time because they're feared more than we are. Yeah, they're the 500-pound gorilla in that arena, that's for sure, right? Also, we have another excuse. I'm the only certified BCS interpreter in the state. Now what? Right? So there's some issues there. So we're starting to see a very big conflict between ideal and real. And we interpreters navigate that all the time. Next one. You're hired to do a deposition by the attorney who represents the deponent. She first talks to you and her client about the client's questions. During the depo, the NES changes his or her story. What do you do? But you were hired by the attorney. Shouldn't you be an agent? Didn't we say we are an agent and we protect? There's no problem there. That seems to be very clear, right? But the question is, should you be the interpreter during the depo? Sign language interpreters would say, no. Hell no, because, right, you're the interpreter for the NES and his or her attorney. There should be a different interpreter for the depo. You have prior knowledge, and thank you for saying that, because that is an issue that we haven't talked about. But if you think about it, that's the problem. You have prior knowledge, and even without really realizing it, could that taint your interpretation? Could that betray? Because when I started in this business, I said, oh, absolutely not. I'm an ethical interpreter. I follow the code of ethics. There's no way that that would affect me in any way. Really? Right, exactly. You're also a human being. Is it possible that you would have a slip or something, or could affect your interpretation? Because you know that the way you interpret things. Okay, the next one. You're called to interpret in court for a hearing. Turns out it's a jury trial, not a hearing. And it's expected to last 3 days. No second interpreter. What do you do? Yes, what does that mean? You're not doing it? You need a second interpreter. And they say, sorry, Charlie, we have none. You do what? Hold on a second.
I spout off a bunch of ethics.
Right. But would you do it or not? You wouldn't, because somebody here says that they would do it. Yes? Huh?
Request breaks.
Request breaks?
Well, I mean, like, yeah, I mean, if it's a jury trial, no.
Jury trial, no, so no breaks? Or no do it?
Not do it.
Not do, probably. You see, how many of you are like, eh? So, because, hey, $50 an hour, I don't know how much you get paid, but let's assume $50 an hour, right? 8 hours a day, $400. 3 days, $1,200. Are you turning it down? Yes. Good for you if you really are. Good for you. I think we should all, I know, I'm out of time. I wish I could have finished this, but apparently I'm completely out of time, so I will just tell you that, can we put up the website for a second? What I have to tell you is this was a pleasure. I promise you I had a conclusion for this, but I ran out of time. But keep going. Well, I don't know, the next presenter would be happy about that. But we're going to show, I wanted to invite you all in November. We have our 4th Finding the Parallels conference in Orlando. And for the first time, we're going to mix it with ConVTI and De La More Interpreter Training. And we have had a lot of success with this conference because it's for both interpreters in the medical and legal field, because we're starting to find out that there's a lot of parallels that we haven't even gotten to. And so I invite you all, go visit us. It's not very clear here because of the colors, but our website, if anybody's interested, what's on the slides is delamoratraining.com or interpreter-training.com. This is in November 14th to the 17th. I promise you it's a great experience, and you'll have very good speakers, some from out of the country, some from the country, and then I might be there too. And so thank you very much. I appreciate the time. Thank you.
Once again, I'd like to present Mr. De La
Oh.
with the Florida Court Interpreter Conference.
Thank you very much.
Thank you for
Hey, I won a cup. There you go. Thank you. I've been mugged, exactly.